Hey, psychology class, introductory students. Today we're going to talk about motivation and emotion. If you are using your OpenStax free textbook, this corresponds to chapter 10. But we go off book a bit here, so let's dive in. We're going to talk about the differences between motivation, drive, instinct, incentive, all these different vocabulary terms, which I'd like you to know. We're also going to talk about Maslow and for what he's famous, which is that pyramid of the hierarchy of needs. It's going to be great. And then we'll have a little bit of time to talk about sweet emotion. We're talking amygdala stuff there, yeah. But let's get into this, motivation. And I'm going to start by asking you what is probably the most important question you can ask yourself, and that is, what is motivating you to do whatever you're doing? For instance, what's motivating you to listen to this video or watch this video, and maybe you'll say because of class, but what's motivating you to be in class? Maybe you'll say degree. What's motivating you to get that degree? Maybe you say a job, but what's motivating you to get job? And you'll say money. What's motivating you to get the money? And that's where the real answers start to appear. So often we get caught up in doing the things we do. We don't even take the times to think about why the heck are we doing it. And in order to understand motivation, we need to know the definition. Motivation, factors within and outside an organism that cause it to behave a certain way at a certain time. What the hell does that mean? Well, right now you're not motivated to run out of the room screaming, but if all of a sudden the room was on fire, that would change your motivation. Your motivation can change from one moment to the next because of what's going on around you or what's going on within you. And that's where we come into the difference between drive and incentive. Drive is the internal conditioner impulse that activates behavior. So I think of like the drive-in movie theater because this is internal needs. We're talking like hunger, thirst. Like right now, maybe you're not ready to go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, but fast forward 4 hours if you've eaten nothing, now you're thinking, man, some ponderosa sounds pretty good right about now. Incentive, the external goal that pulls or pushes behavior. You may not be motivated to mow my lawn, but I give you $100 and there you are, mowing my lawn. So we're going to talk about this more in the next slide, where we talk about the different theories of motivation. And I like to think of it almost as a smart person's dating life. What do I mean by that? Well, let's suppose you're in one relationship and that relationship doesn't work out. So you get into the next relationship. Hopefully the next relationship, you've learned your lessons from the previous and apply them to the new one. Like maybe at first you say, I just want someone who's good looking. And then you get out of that relationship because it was horrible. And then you realize, okay, I want a relationship with someone I'm attracted to, but also someone who has a good sense of humor. And that relationship doesn't work. So then you're like, all right, I need someone who's attractive, has a good sense of humor, but also has goals in their life. So it picks up where the other one left off, if you will. And that's what these theories are going to do. Without further ado, the first is the instinct theory, that we're motivated by instincts. And we covered this in Lifespan, where babies are born with a rooting reflex and a sucking reflex. Does that explain all behavior? Is there a make sure you show up to work or class on time instinct? Most likely not. And that's where the drive theory comes in. Now, the drive theory says we're driven by homeostasis. And homeostasis is a vocabulary term, one that I like to put on tests. But it basically means that we like to keep the constancy of our internal condition. So imagine that you're playing The Sims. And when you play The Sims, you have a character that you have to take care of, basically. And it has all these little health bars, but they're not all about health. Like there's a hunger meter, and there's a sleep meter, and there's like a loneliness meter. And this is kind of drive theory. Drive theory is that if one of those meters gets low, you have to do what it's asking you to do. If your hunger meter gets low, boop, 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 what do you have to tell your sim to do? Go eat. Then boop, 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 boop. The meter goes back up. You're getting tired. Boop, 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 boop. Better get some sleep. Boop, 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 boop. And that's drive theory. The idea that we're driven by everything internally. Now, Sigmund Freud actually agreed with the drive theory because he said we're driven by sex. And that's actually one of the meters for drive theory because we have this internal pull towards that behavior. But does that explain all behaviors? Because, working at a job where you're entering data, that doesn't necessarily feed you. that doesn't necessarily give you shelter. It indirectly does, though, because it gives you your incentives. And that's incentive theory. So imagine the same thing as drive theory, but we add on a couple of meters that are external. For instance, money and power. So you're doing a job for money and respect. Now, a lot of people argue that between these three, instinct, drive, and incentive, all behaviors can be explained. But let me ask you this. Why would you jump out of a perfectly working airplane? I'm talking about skydiving. Is it going to feed you? Is it going to get you sex? I mean, maybe there's someone out there that says, I only sleep with skydivers. So there you are, like jumping out of an airplane. But that's a pretty rare circumstance. I don't think that covers it. In incentive theory, a lot of people don't necessarily get a whole bunch of respect by jumping out of airplanes, and it definitely costs a lot of money. It doesn't make you a lot of money. So why would someone do something as dangerous and exciting as that? Well, that's where the arousal theory comes into play. Imagine that we want homeostasis with our arousal as well, but it's a little bit more complicated than homeostasis because we want it perfectly in the middle. I'll explain it this way. If you're really bored for a long time, you become a sensation seeker, someone who needs more arousal. So after a really long, boring week of work, you're really looking forward to getting your freak on that weekend because you need some excitement. But let's suppose you're living in the zombie apocalypse, where every moment is a fight for your survival. Even going to sleep is incredibly dangerous because you may wake up with a zombie eating you, or even going to the bathroom. Oh man, that's a dead end usually. So going into a bathroom stall, if a zombie finds you, there's nowhere to go except through that zombie. If you are always stressed out, what are you looking forward to? Just like a nice, relaxing, boring bath. So that's arousal theory. We try to maintain an optimal level of excitement. But does that explain all behaviors? Why would anyone do charity? It's a selfless act for another. A lot of people argue there is no such thing as a selfless act because anytime you're being selfless, you're actually doing it to get respect from other people, or maybe you're doing it because you're bored in arousal theory. But some people argue that you're doing it just to be the best person you can be. And those people are humanists. Humanists basically argue that what motivates us more than anything else is when we look in the mirror, we want to look at someone that we respect and like. The humanistic theory of motivation says we're motivated to simply be the best person we can be. And those are the different theories of motivation. You're definitely going to want to know the difference between drive, incentive, and you'll want to know the definition of motivation, because I like to put those questions on tests. But now we get to talk about Maslow and his idea of psychological motivation. And before I talk about Maslow, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's right or wrong to steal? Hopefully most of you say, no, it's not right to steal. That's against the law. I don't want people stealing my stuff. Here's a different question. Would you ever steal? Because it all depends on what's going on in our life. You may think it's really wrong to steal, but if you are starving to death on the streets and there is some fruit vendor walking by, fruits, get your fresh fruit, you just might go ahead and steal some of that fruit. This gives us Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because he suggested that our motivations come in levels. Anytime a student completes Psychology 1010, they're expected to know this. Bam! Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow has his hierarchy of needs. And there's 3 basic categories. There are the basic needs, then there's the psychological needs, and then once you get those met, then you can worry about your self-fulfillment needs. And those are the 3 levels that you really should know well. But let's break it down into the very minor counterparts. For instance, physiological needs, food, water, warmth, rest. You're not really worried about the upcoming election if you're starving to death. You're not worried about the status of your relationship romantically if you're starving to death. If you're starving to death, you're worried only about one thing, and that's food! Next, if you have all of your food, water, warmth, and rest met, then you worry about your safety needs. What the hell does that mean? Imagine that you're starving to death, and I give you a meal. You hungrily eat it. Now what are you worried about? Now don't just say safety needs. What does that mean? Well, realistically, you realize, well, thanks for the meal. I really enjoyed it, but I know in 3 hours, I'm just going to be hungry again. Instead of giving you a meal, what should I do? And that's, I should teach you how to continually get meals. It's that classic expression. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And that's what safety needs are. Safety needs mean that you consistently can fill your physiological needs, so you no longer have to worry about your physiological needs. Once you have your two basic needs met, the physiological and safety needs, then you can start worrying about psychological needs. Are you loved enough? Do you have enough friends? Are you getting enough validation? What are you worried about? If you spend most of your energy, day in and day out, concerned about your relationship or your friendships or how popular you are, it means that you're in the belongingness and love need stage and your needs aren't being met. But if you do feel secure in your friendships and in your love, then you can worry about esteem needs, which is prestige and respect. Am I making enough money? Am I contributing to society enough? Do I feel like I mean something on this planet? And only then, only after you've satisfied all of these needs, can you start worrying about self-actualization. What the hell is self-actualization? I want you, as you listen to me, answer this question in your head. What do you spend most of your time thinking about? On the average day, what do you worry about the most? What thought goes through your mind the most? This kind of lets you know where you are in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the cool thing is, if you're not worried about any of the priors, it means you may have reached self-actualization, which is incredibly rare according to Maslow. So what the hell is self-actualization? You want to be there, because it means you're living an amazing life. I'll describe it in more details as Maslow did, because they're right here. Someone who's self-actualized has a sense of realism and acceptance. This means that they accept others and themselves as they are. That's even hard for most people to imagine, because here's a sign that you are not self-actualized. If you've ever told someone, you know what you should do, or if only this person, why can't they just be? If you've said any of those things, it shows that you're not really accepting the world and others as they are. Spontaneity. Doing things not because society tells you to do, but because you really want to. I have a friend who showed an amazing example of spontaneity. We were talking about Philly steak and cheese sandwiches, and he had never had one. And he said, you know what? I've never had a Philly steak and cheese, so I'm going to go have me one. And he went out and got himself a Philly steak and cheese sandwich from Philadelphia because he had the time and he thought, oh, this is a little adventure time. And so he spontaneously went there, which sounds crazy. Why didn't he just go get a Hot Pocket? Because he said, if I'm going to get a Philly steak and cheese, I want the best damn Philly steak and cheese ever. Now that's a beautiful example of spontaneity. Self-actualized people are problem-centered. Imagine that you pop the tire of your car as you're driving. You pull it over. It's really bad weather outside, raining like crazy. How do most people change that tire? Well, they do it emotionally. Damn it! I can't believe But how does someone who's self-actualized change that tire? They just change the tire. Because self-actualized people don't really dwell on could-haves or what-ifs or whatever. They are just very focused on solving problems that are set before them. Now here's the next thing. Self-actualized people have a sense of autonomy. Autonomy is a vocabulary term that keeps popping its head up in psychology, so we need to know what the hell does autonomy mean. A lot of different theorists have different definitions, but let me give you Professor Girding's definition of autonomy. Autonomy is being master of your own destiny. That's right. If you are autonomous, it means that you believe you are in control of your own destiny. For instance, if you're in a dead-end relationship that's going nowhere and you have a sense of autonomy, what do? You get out. If you're in a dead-end job and you have a sense of autonomy, what do? You find a new job. That's the idea of autonomy. Or do you just think you're a victim of fate? Do you think that you do not have control over your life? If things are going wrong in your life, is it everyone else's fault that these are going wrong? Or do you step up? That's a sense of autonomy. So even though you accept and enjoy other people, self-actualized individuals have a strong need to do things on their own and have a sense of independence. Now, This is how I know I'm not self-actualized, is because self-actualized individuals have a continued freshness of appreciation. This means that they enjoy the smallest things. I know this isn't me because I remember when I discovered a pile of cat puke in my room. And how did I discover it? With my bare feet. And I did not experience that and think, wow, this is amazing. It's not every day that you feel something this squishy and gross in between your toes. Wow, and this is hilarious. Of course I found this puke with my feet because that's the way the cookie crumbles. That was not how I experienced that. No, instead I was pretty upset. So continued freshness of appreciation. Peak experiences is evidence that we've all touched self-actualization at some point. We've all touched self-actualization because we've had these really intense moments where everything seems perfect. And it's one of these weird, ironic truths that when we feel this amazing, we suddenly get this idea of, why can't I feel this way forever? So we try to hold on to that idea, and it's like a slippery bar of soap, because the mere effort of trying to hold on to that feeling is oftentimes what causes that feeling to go away. So peak experiences are moments of intense ecstasy, wonder, and awe during which you feel that you're lost or transcended. You feel as transformed or strengthened by these peak experiences. It's like you're high on drugs, but you're not high on drugs. What are you high on? That's right, you're high on life. That's peak experiences, and this is why you want to be self-actualized. Here's a better example of what it means to be self-actualized. When you go to bed tonight, reflect upon your day. And if your reflection reveals to you that you wouldn't have rathered spend the day any other way, that's one day of self-actualization. When you look back and say, today was perfect. If I could do it all over again, I would change nothing because I really milked today for everything that it's worth. That is every day in someone who lives in self-actualization. We can touch self-actualization, but it's incredibly rare that someone lives there. In fact, Maslow said less than 1% of the history of the world's population ever reaches self-actualization and stays there. Less than 1% of the history of the world's population, less than 1% of anyone who's ever lived, not less than 1% of Americans, not less than 1% of the world, less than 1% of any human being ever. So it's incredibly rare, insanely rare, according to Maslow. So the simple definition for self-actualization is the full use, exploitation of talents, capacities, and potentialities. But then DC and Ryan came around and they built a car. They didn't actually build a car. That's just my way of teaching you some type of mnemonic device to help you remember these three things. Because DC and Ryan said, Maslow, I like what you're doing, bro. Really good idea with the hierarchy of needs, but guess what? I think it could be a little bit easier. So they proposed a self-determination theory, and instead of having this tiered system that we have in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they said all you need to be the most ultimate person are these three items. 1, competence. Ask yourself this. If you were to go home today to find that your kitchen sink was spitting water everywhere, could you fix it? Can you fix that sink? And if you say, no, I can't fix that sink, then you're showing a lack of competence. If you say, hell yeah, I can fix that sink, you're showing competence. But a lot of you are probably thinking, I can't fix that sink. But the question wasn't, could you fix that sink right here and now? Because having a sense of competence means that you believe that what one person can do, you can do as well. So the best answer you probably could have given to that question if you don't know how to fix a sink is, yeah, I can fix that sink. I don't know how to yet, but I believe in my ability to figure it out and do it successfully, because that is what it means to be competent. Number 2 is autonomy. We already talked about autonomy. Autonomy, being the master of your own destiny, as Professor Girding says, that's me. But the first two are kind of very individual. Are you competent? Do you believe you can do what another person can do? Autonomy. Do you believe that you are the master of your own destiny? But relatedness has to do with other people. Relatedness is that connection that you may have with someone else. And so ask yourself, is there someone with whom you can totally just share yourself with whom you feel this relatedness, that you can lower your defenses and just totally be yourself? Shields down. Hello, this is the real me. I like to talk in crazy voices. So these are the three things: DC and Ryan's self-determination theory, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So let's talk about emotion. Ha ha ha. There's a lot of emotions, but let me ask you this. Do emotions serve a purpose? What would William James say? William James, the founder of functionalism. Functionalism, the belief that all behaviors, and yes, even emotions, serve a function of survival. Yeah, emotions do help us survive. So there's three different components to an emotion. There's the subjective experience, the physiological response, and the expressive response. Subjective experience. If we see a car crash, and we see the exact same car crash, do we experience the same thing? The answer is no. Because maybe you see that car crash, and you say, oh no, but I see that car crash and I go, oh yes. So experiences are totally subjective. What one person has happen, another. Because here's another question. Do we all have the same emotionality? Or are some of us more emotional than others? We're totally different. We're snowflakes. Totally different. So the physiological response is the unique biofeedback that an emotion has. Maybe you've heard this expression, oh wow, they really are getting some cold feet. Cold feet, typically used to describe a bride or groom right during their wedding. Cold feet means that you're getting scared, nervous. And guess what? It's not a clever expression, because when you are experiencing fear, do you know what happens to your body temperature? It goes down. So you actually have cold feet. So the physiological response to fear is lowering the body temperature. What do you think happens with anger? Have you ever heard the expression, man, that guy's really hot under the collar. He may think he's the cat's pajamas, but he's hot under the collar. Hot under the collar, that's because when you're angry, your body temperature goes up. So yeah, every single emotion has a physiological response. And then 3 is the expressive response. We express emotions in all sorts of different ways. Using our face, smiling, frowning. We even make sounds. Yeah! Oh, no! Ah! We do all sorts of expressions when we have emotions. But those are the 3 components of an emotional experience. The subjective experience, the physiological response, and the expressive response. Let's talk about emotional intelligence. Because you need to understand other people's emotions, and you need to be able to control and comprehend your own emotions in order to better function in our world. It's fascinating because there is a study that shows that intelligence is not a good predictor of your life satisfaction, meaning that if you have a really high IQ, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be successful or happy. Also, if you have a low IQ, a low intelligence score, it doesn't mean that you're doomed to be miserable or unsuccessful. But you know what a greater predictor is of success and satisfaction in life? Is emotional intelligence, your ability to understand your own emotions. And we all know emotional idiots. We know an emotional idiot, someone who can't control their own emotions, just victims of it. Ah! Even when they're calm, you tell them like, man, you're a real emotional person. I think you really should check yourself before you wreck yourself next time you start getting all angry. And their response to you just gently trying to tell them that is they get angry in your face. What are you talking about, man? I can handle my emotions fine. It totally replaces their logic with emotion. But we also know the emotional idiot that doesn't understand other people's emotions. Someone comes up to you really sad. Oh my goodness, Chad left me. It's horrible and my dog just died. I'm in a horrible state. In fact, Chad left me because my dog died. He only loved me for my dog. Now I don't have a dog, and now I don't even have Chad. And your response is something like, do you think it's going to rain today? Because I want to wash my car, and I don't know. You just totally don't know how to react to someone else's emotions. So both of those are examples of a lack of emotional intelligence, but having an abundance of emotional intelligence means that you can control your own emotions, expressing them when it's appropriate, necessary, and useful, and you can interpret other people's emotions. It's really important to have good emotional intelligence, because that will probably be on your test, and it will also be on the test of life. And that's it. That's chapter 10. So we talked about the different theories of emotion. So know the difference between drive and incentive. Which one of those is internal? Which one of those is external? We talked about Maslow. Know the different categories. There's the basic needs, the psychological needs, and the self-fulfillment needs. We talked about DC and Ryan's big three. The car. Competence, C. Autonomy, A. Relatedness, R. And we talked about the emotion, the different components to an emotion, the physiological response, the subjective experience, the expressive response, etc. We talked about the functions of emotion, and I gave you that vocabulary term, emotional intelligence. Know these things, and you will do well, not just in my class, but in life. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Professor Girding. You can call me Professor G. I will see you next time.